Right, so I think, there we go. I think we are now live on YouTube. Well, good evening, everybody. Hey, hi, I hope everybody's doing well. Yep, there we are live. Spannering it as I talk here. So yeah, I hope everybody's good and doing well. Welcome to another week, another episode. Operation Grow Show, and on the show this evening we've got two of the regulars. We've got GMF and we've got Magma Seeds. How are you guys doing?
Good.
No complaints, man. Feet above ground. It's a great week. Not dead yet. Dealing with the abundance of the garden. You know, that's basically what I've been doing today is packing tomatoes in oil, salted tomatoes in oil, so I can keep them over the winter. That's about it.
I would wonder if I'm just going to check to me quickly because I don't know. It says two are watching, so people are actually able to get on and see this. I wasn't sure. It's got something that says private, and I can't see the chat anywhere, or how to enable that. Or does that only start a little way into it these days? I can't remember. It's been so long since I've been doing this. Acting like a. Ah, well, we'll see what happens. Hopefully, it'll kick in. Yeah, but everybody's alive and well, which is good. Anything new and exciting happening in your necks of the world? I see there's been some stuff, at least in the cannabis world, happening in the US. But with some trying to reschedule stuff. I didn't watch that video to its end, GMF. I just like briefly skimmed it.
No worries. Yeah, just stuff's getting crazy around here. I mean, it's basically right now it's listed as a Schedule 1, meaning it has no therapeutic value, et cetera, et cetera. What they want to do is switch it to a Schedule 3. That would mean it's treated like Tylenol with codeine. So there's a complete, infrastructure for it already. There's already a regulation system for it, and that would all be handled. Typically, if they were just to do that, that would fall under the, USDA, or the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. DA is Department of Agriculture.
Yeah.
But that's funny enough. The difference is because it's typically when something's a whole plant, we treat it under the Department of Agriculture. But when it gets processed into something, especially a medicine, it's the Food and Drug Administration. So it's going to be interesting to see where they decide to weave it in to the political fabric. Do you treat it more like I said, Tylenol 3 or something like that, and so it's a Schedule 3, or do you treat it more like alcohol, where there is regulation, but it's only by age, not medicinal, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just interesting to see where it's going to fall right now.
Yeah.
At least from a regulatory perspective. And there's a bunch of other crazy, wacky stuff happening around here right now too. I think it was the people who make G-Pen, Grenco, they struck a licensing deal with the Grateful Dead. So they'll be, our community has gone full on now into capitalism and how that, we're getting licensing deals and stuff like that. And then High Times, I think they did a licensing deal with, I want to say Lucy Scientific, another company that makes stuff. So yeah, all these names are getting licensed.
We did kind of predict this was what, the route it was going to go down earlier on in this show's career, where we were talking about, when money gets involved, everybody starts to, protect their shit. Things get licensed. Stuff is going to get trademarked. It's all going to go from there. Shit ain't going to be as free as people were hoping it might be. Because, money's involved all of a sudden. Hey, Raptor, how you doing, buddy?
Cheers, everyone. Just on that note, money's always been involved. It's like, but what's being written down and like, hey, I'm getting taxed on this, so I have to report it.
Big money's involved.
Yeah, big money.
Well, and that would be the biggest difference with getting with getting rescheduled is now right now companies can't ever, if you're a cannabis company, you can't write off the paper you use in the printer and all that kind of stuff. Or the, the stuff you buy to clean the floor, none of that can be written off, whereas every other business can. Once it goes to Schedule 3, you no longer have to obey what's called IRS Rule 280E. And then anyone can benefit from the tax write-offs like any other company. So that's the other one. You make a good point, Raptor. I forgot to mention that.
Oh yeah, it's always the bottom line. It's always the bottom line, because once like where it's starting to get official, well, guess what? They're gonna have to submit like going to the actual cultivation. They're gonna actually have to submit forms saying I forget what it's called, but yeah, basically saying how they perform everything. What kind of insecticides do you use? What do you what's the flow rate of everyone? How much fertilizer are you using? What kind of fertilizer are you using? What are you letting drain out into the waste system? All of this is gonna get much bigger very quickly. And yeah, I don't know if like logistically we're ready for it, but it's going to get done by someone, and it's the people that can get it done logistically and can put down hard facts like, hey, we need X amount of money to move all this through to make X amount more money for you. The more people that are going to be coming in that can have answers for those people, those are the ones that are going to be making the full money. Like those are the ones that know how to write those tax forms. Yeah.
And you get your R&D taxes and all sorts of interesting things back, tax breaks back. Yeah, I mean, it's getting into that. It's growing up. It's becoming a proper, welcome to the real world. It's the kind of stuff that, if you saw, it's that bit. The main bits happen now. Bubbles sort of not quite burst, but it's the dust has settled, and people have now, those who have taken it seriously are the ones who'll succeed.
So I keep saying, Pete, you guys are imminent, man. You guys are just about to fall yourselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it is getting, I agree. I do think it is getting closer and closer. There was an article the other day on the,
was it medicinal? How long ago did it pass? Like a couple years ago?
So it got passed in 2018. No, from 2018 it was medically legal for like the NHS to prescribe it. They've made 5 prescriptions since 2018 on the NHS.
And before that, it was legal for a long time. It was approved medicine in all EU for a long time.
But so there are private clinics that are able to prescribe it, and that's growing and growing and growing. And I'm bumping into more and more people who've got prescriptions and therefore have their medical cards, etc. Definitely seeing that starting to creep in.
Over here in California, it was private practices. Same. I don't know what it was supposed to be before, but definitely more individual doctors that I've been seeing a pattern as I like renew every year, and I just renewed mine. So yeah, good to go for the next year. But it's a lot of like older, like 60, 70, 80 people that are still practicing, and that's how they're getting money coming in. Even though they're not seeing the patients, they'll have like individual Zoom calls or just like over the phone. So it's just, I don't know how it's working over there. If they're probably doing
I think there's more for the private clinics to be doing it and then the NHS to be doing it as such, even though, it's available. And then I don't think it was, quote unquote free on the NHS, or that it cost any less. I think it was probably quite expensive through the NHS as well. I don't know enough about it on that side, but from what I understand, it was also quite laborious and quite expensive to get it through the NHS as opposed to from the clinics, because the NHS has to buy in bulk, in terms of you can't have 50 different strains on the NHS. They'll have one, and that's all they're going to do. And it's the National Health Service. They're not doing pick and mix, whereas the private clinics in that can be a little bit more, each of them can have their own offerings, etc., they're not governed by the same restrictions as the NHS. Same as if we went to private medical over here, same thing happens. You've got slightly maybe a broader choice, but it's going to cost you more.
I'm sure it's more gray too, like what they're allowing in. It's like there's no real. I wonder what the limitations are, if there are any.
From what I've seen on like the menus of the, I call them menus on the prescription lists of the private ones, they've got quite a good range. I mean, it is quite impressive what they've got. A lot of the, in terms of the different flour that's available, there's quite a lot that's, you hear, it's the stuff that's currently the buzz.
I mean,
the NHS, as I say, will have one, it'll be like government weed,
There should be in reality, there should be everything. There should be that, like, hey, stable, where we can reliably give this to cancer patients, and they're gonna have a reliable dose, no matter what they're given. And then there's other people that just like, hey, I have constant migraines, but I also like the flavor.
Yeah. And it's the same thing that you guys went through. It needs to make sure it doesn't carry any, it's properly grown. It's not like we've loaded up with heavy metals and pesticides and molds and all sorts of other weird and wonderful things. So they've got all of that interesting stuff to go through still on that front.
Yeah, that's the main thing here. It's that and biologicals. So a big thing, I don't know for much outside of California, but aspergillus. Yeah, they have a lot of people are complaining that the CFU count is too low for the detection rate for aspergillus on the tests for cannabis. Like the rate, like you wouldn't even, like, cigarettes aren't getting that, food isn't getting that, all these things aren't getting that, but this one cash crop. And I understand to an extent, but if you're eating 10 times more CFUs than what's allowed on that product, it's I would have to research more into it, like how that affects us, like in terms of inhalation. I'm sure it's way more, like, so I totally understand.
Yeah, that's also that big difference, is the difference between burning something and eating something.
Yeah, so that's a whole different thing. So I can understand, but that's a whole other wormhole that people are, I see cultivators are being concerned of around California specifically, just because a lot of people aren't making that they aren't coming up to those standards.
Yeah, but that's like a lot of industries. What you start to find is that there's regulation gets brought in, and you often think the people that are pushing for this regulation are all the big players because they can afford it. It keeps the competition out, because to suddenly step in and you're having to pay for like how many tests, how many things do have to get checked, SOPs up the arse, if you want to go and get ISO certified and things like that, next minute it's costing you a lot of money. But if you're a multi-million revenue company per annum, it's inexpensive, and you're probably the one who's saying, oh, we need to introduce more regulation into the industry because you can afford to do it. And by keeping everybody else out, you start to capitalize on the industry. You see it all over the place. It's quite horrific how much some of the shit starts to cost. But yeah, I mean, one of the things I wanted to sort of go on from, like, at the end of the last show, talking about I brought up that, like, the thing with scientific theory meaning something completely different, and then I was watching a couple of shows during the week, and something that cropped up was talking about plant breeding and genetics. And again, what was interesting was hearing them talking about recessive genes, and they were almost implying that recessive genes were bad. You didn't want to breed for recessive genes or recessive traits. And I think this is that piece where it's the use of language and the understanding of the terminology in the context in which it's being used, because recessive traits in terms of genetics does not mean it's bad. It just means you need to be homozygous in those traits, which means it's going to be carried on both sides for it to be expressed. Whereas the dominant traits can be heterozygous and they express themselves. And if you're into doing plant breeding and you're now wanting to make sure that it's difficult for somebody to take your plant that you've spent a lot of time, and this is where proper plant breeding comes into play, is you spend a lot of time and effort probably like trying to stabilize in some of those recessive traits. So picking parents that are, until you have a homozygous recessive trait constantly coming through the line, the second you cross that with something else, well, that recessive trait's going to disappear. So you're not going to see it anymore, which makes it really difficult to then, if that was one of the ones that you were specifically after, it's kind of helps to make sure that it only appears in yours. And it makes it very difficult for somebody to take your strain or your plant that you've carefully bred and breed with it and express those traits in their line of plants. They're going to have to put in a lot more work to try and get that
I was
to
just
come
about
out
to
and be
say
stable.
they're actually going to have to work to do their breeding. They're going to actually have to do breeding to sell that product if they want to get it out. And it's like it. Yeah, looking into so much agriculture, it's like takes years to decades to get these genetics, and of course they have patents on it. There's decades of work of paying all these people. So yeah, I mean, just put in the work, people. At least put in 1 to 2 years worth of growing, knowing what it can give you, and stabilize it, or at least say, hey, it's not stable, so you get X amount off. You know, instead of me charging you 120, I'm charging you 60 for a 12-pack. At least it's okay.
Do you think it's? Could you see it in the future being like corn or watermelon, like how it originated to how it's gonna turn out? Like having a massive change?
I mean,
in a direction where we just look at the weed now and we think like, what the hell is that?
Well, my in the group chat that I'm in, my friend actually posted like a 20-weeker plus, and it just looked nothing like what we have on the shelves. It was like super foxtaily and very, very thin buds. And now look at where we are now.
Yeah.
Like even just look at compare like what I'm saying to like GMF's avatar. Like it's thicker. It's it's. I can't talk about
only his avatar was showing so people could see. But I mean, like so, you look at most of yours like land race type strains.
Typical Instagram bud pick. Where it's nice, big, thick colas.
But do you think that's like the top level, or do you think it's gonna expand to something that we haven't seen yet? Like
I think it's
10 times as massive.
I think it's definitely. I mean, we already had like big bud, but then that went too far. Where there is like well, you might want that like genetic for its expression there, but then there's no flavor. Like every big bud that I've had, I got a lot of it because they were trying to get rid of a lot of it all at once. So as long
that
as
must
we're
be a big recessive.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
it's
it's more
for the right things. Like, and then like, what's the right thing? Like, it's so subjective from me to you, Magma. Like, even though we have similar growing, we might have like different. Like, let's say I only like gas and fruit, and you like, maybe more like incense or more spicy.
Yeah, no, I see it more like they're gonna be focusing more on the building blocks, because with the right building blocks you can really go whichever taste direction you want.
That's
much
true.
Easier, like what breeder Steve has made. He has this thing that like even if you're breeding something and it's herm, he can give you this technique, and then your seeds, your plants are not going to be able to make seeds, So even if it was a herm, it wouldn't affect your product, So for me, I look at it like there's going to be all these new building blocks, for PM resistance, for weight gain, for like, I want the really heavy, tall, robust plant. Put whatever you like, its taste into this, and try to work towards it. Much more than.
So does that? Because is that where we see? I mean, we were getting into this topic, in the last season, but is that where we potentially will start to see being able to map out the genome, understand what it is, and therefore be able to make better selection in selective breeding. Like I know I want to cross from this with this because I can see what's in its genome and I can see what's in this one's genome. And I know, okay, I bring these together and I can track it and I can do that. So it becomes very focused selective breeding, which is what the Monsantos and that of this world do. And that's what they spend a lot of time and effort on. I mean, why do you think they're able to create a plant that their weed killer doesn't kill, but it kills everything else? Because they've worked out how to genetic, and it's not necessarily genetic engineering or even GMO. It's been
selective breeding.
Very selective breeding.
Very selective breeding.
And then they
way
start
more
to
than
figure
we were
that out.
doing our ancestors.
Yeah. You know, and that's part of the thing that I want to see happen is, you know, my personal gripe is when you buy a pack of seeds, 20 seeds or 10 seeds, and they go 15 phenotypes, and you go, bro, that's more seeds than I've got. You know, I want to see consistency and stability. I want to be able to pick up a pack of seeds like I do when I go down and buy
2
a
or
pack
3
of
is
seeds.
Acceptable to me. You know, you get that with like
at the moment, but at some point
like
I want it to be consistent. If you want to charge me that kind of money, it needs to be consistent.
Buying petunias. I want that color pack of like yellow and purple petunias together. I don't want any other guesses on it. I want consistency coming in. Yeah. I
So
see
if
that
you're saying these are the flavors, or this is the cannabinoid profile and the chemotype profile, well, then that's what I should be getting, not hunt it down. And that, I think, has become, you know, I hate to say it, but the scourge of the industry. It's all just chasing whatever's latest. And this is when this is why people focus on dominant traits, because it means I can throw anything together and these things will start to express themselves. But the really interesting and probably really cool stuff is where there's the recessive traits, because that's a lot rarer. It's a lot more difficult to actually bring out and express. And so a lot of breeding has probably happened where all it is, it's these dominant traits. And in doing so, they've just wiped out all of the recessive traits
50%.
over time.
At least they just wiped out 50% of the potential for like, what if those recessive traits that we're throwing out are like PM resistance? What if they're like keeping things short, like making sure they're nice and stout, like, or you know, there's a lot that we're throwing away. You know, we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater here.
And if you do it for long enough, you eventually remove it altogether. And it never comes back.
Do you see the seed market surviving with like the seedless technology starting to spread and become more mainstream?
You mean like tissue culture?
No, like what Breeder Steve's made. He has like this this technique where he takes your favorite plant and he helps you turn it into this thing that you can replicate as a clone and sell to people. And it's not going to produce seeds, never. So you can have it in like a field with as many males or anything you want, and it's going to be
sterile plants.
And
yeah, probably. I mean, and then if you've worked out what the gene is, if you found a plant that can do it, I mean, I would say that that's probably something where there's maybe the result of crossing it with something else causes that to happen, or you're actually getting in and manipulating the genes at that sort of level. I can't almost, let's say CRISPR, but, you know, doing some kind of gene editing to get it to do that. Because, you know, in nature, it happens. All mules are sterile. So, you know, depending on what you cross causes that to happen. So if he's got something that he knows, if I cross this with anything, the result of that is the progeny are now all sterile. You can only do this with clones.
I don't know what the technique is, but he was talking about pollen culture on males, where they were growing the pollen directly to try to do selections like that, and all kind of advanced stuff. So I just see like all these big companies that you were mentioning earlier, you know, once they start to get their hold, it'd be an easy way for them to protect what they're producing and keep the stuff going. And like it's so much more convenient, you know. Convenience is a big thing for everyone.
Well,
So
and I think you just hit the nail on the head with that, because I don't think if we're going to talk about the future of the market, you got to talk about who the future consumer really is. And the future consumer is not going to be someone who's probably buying flour. It's going to be someone who's buying a pre-roll or a dab or something like that. Just like, you know, going forward, that's the convenience people are going to expect. And as a result, like Pete said before, it's going to be more about, and that's not going to so much be about what it looks like, unless some of the current lawsuits over your menu having to look like exactly the picture that you show, you know, really stick. But I think what you're going to get is something akin to what the hop market does. You know, University of Washington, all these different places breed new and interesting hops, and they take off and they're popular, they're flashes in the pan. But when it comes to like quote unquote your Budweisers, they're taking the same couple of things and blending them every year to get a very consistent flavor. They're taking something that varies year to year in its flavor profile, but is fairly close, and they reformulate it based on the year's hops to get a consistent product. I think the same thing's going to eventually happen, that larger companies are going to take, like Magma said, these building blocks, learn how to blend them appropriately to create their signature product, and then they'll just reblend every year to create that same flavor. Maybe this year they use a little more of this, so this year a little more of that in the blend, whatever, but they're going for the same flavor profile. Kind of like how Hershey's chocolate always blends for what we call a barnyard flavor. It's got a little musty grassiness to it. Same thing there. So I think ultimately the consumer is not going to be us, those that grow at home. We're going to fall by the wayside. We're going to be like home brewers are now. We're going to be very secondary customers. The real customer is going to be the one who's just picking something up at the gas station and taking it home, and they're interested just that it's their brand. At least that's my guess.
You know, I agree. I think shelf space and branding is gonna dominate a lot of the market, unfortunately.
Right. So no one's going to care how many phenols are in a pack of seeds, except for those of us who are quote unquote home brewers. Those of us who are, you know, still doing this stuff, we're going to be a small group. And then there's going to be a major industry that does things on a very larger scale. So I think we can look at, you know, especially the hop industry, how that works as an agricultural product, and then compare it to the alcohol industry and how it's going to eventually end up scaled up and distributed. At least that's my guess.
And you know, I go back to the point. My gripe is, I'm willing to pay if you've put in the work. If you haven't put in the work, then I'm not willing to pay. If you're just making,
but how many of you are there?
Hopefully more and more of us.
But that's the real question. How many of us are going to be interested in buying seeds? And how many people are going to just be, give me a final product? I don't care where, like tomatoes, right? Some of us grow them in the garden. I just planted some, so I'll have tomatoes and cucumbers growing over winter. But
yeah, but I think people, actually, if I look at my local garden center and how many packs of seeds and how many varieties of seeds and how many people are buying seeds, there's a shit ton of people doing that. The difference is all, you know, these are stable lines of seeds that you're buying. That's just the bit I'm getting to. If you want to charge me, you know, 120 pounds for 10 seeds, I want what it says on the packet. If you're only charging me 10 pounds for a pack of 10 seeds, I really don't give a shit what comes out of it, so long as I find something in amongst that that's usable, then that's great. But as soon as the price goes up, and you telling me, oh, you might find, you know, like the keep of one keep of pheno in amongst all of this, based on your environment and everything else that goes with it, you know, that to me is the problem. And of course, that's the other bit that everybody forgets about. You know, what the environment that the seed producer or breeder was growing things in is what controlled the expression of the genotype that you're buying now. Your environment is probably entirely different altitude, different temperature and humidity profiles, different nutrient ranges that you're using, different lighting. So to even, you know, there's so many variables involved, but if they all come up consistently they all look the same regardless. They all express this, have the same phenotypic expression of that genotype in the environment that I'm growing it in, then great. Then it, you put the work in. But anybody can take two of the current trend plants, slam them together and go, you now have, I don't know, candy floss cookies or whatever the fuck it happens to be at the moment. Do you know what I mean? That to me is where the problem is.
Yeah, but it makes money, and as long as it makes money, it works for people. So there's always going to be a good seg. That's what I said. Like, there's even in hops today, every year there's a new one people want to try. That's good business. People always try it. Customers want to try something new. The end person who wants to buy the product, they want to hear about something new. So I don't know. There's a value to newness, I think, for people.
Yeah, I think it's just you can still make money. I just personally feel a bit ripped off, and we can all, vote with our pound, vote with our dollar, vote with our euro, peso, whatever you happen to be using, by just buying and supporting those who are prepared to put the work in.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to in this open market. You just have to, like, if that's not what you're looking for, don't support that market. Like, I'm not looking for tomatoes that are they're just water, they just fill them up with water and then they move them onto the shelf. I want some flavor to it, so I'm gonna grow that.
Don't just want pink styrofoam.
Yeah, exactly. Rather just, I mean, it's a little better where I'm at because we're a little closer to Mexico where we'll get it if it's the off season. But even still, they're picking them green. They're not picking them, how they should. So I think there will always be a market, but as long as there's that newness coming in, it's like, oh, another year of Blue Dream. Like I like Blue Dream, but if I'm having it every single year, no, I'll have it once.
But there's there's ability to have enough variety out there as well. I just don't see why we treat this particular plant any different to all the others. I use the example. When I go down to the garden center, I can pick from a wide range of chili seeds, or different types of tomatoes. There's loads of them out there, and I can grow a different one every year, and new ones do come out every single year. But to be able to come out and be sold as such, it has to meet certain requirements, and you've seen it. I mean, you want to bring a new crop to market, my God, it's got to have gone through a lot of testing, way more than anybody's been prepared to do in the cannabis industry. Have you done the strip field planting where you just grow row after row after row and look for, okay, in that row, were they all consistent? Was there any variety? And, they go through all these different tests and yield growth tests and potency growth tests, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these things take time. It's not done over one summer in their back garden or in their grow room.
Right. Yeah. That's where I fall into as well. It's show me that you worked, like, if you did it in a year, like, you would better have done like 8 freaking harvests in your indoor and like doing it multiple times. You can't. Yeah, exactly.
It's not possible.
You're trying to fit 2 years into 1 year, and then other people are trying to fit 1 year into like 1 season. Yeah. So there's things that need to change in terms of like the mindset of people. Where like, oh, just because I can, that's great. You can do it, but put in that extra work. I will say, guys, my lunch is done, so I tried to sneak in. But yeah,
thank you very much.
You all, glad everyone is coming back. I'll do my best. This time should be good for me on Fridays. 1 o'clock is around my lunch, and then everything's gonna be stable because I needed everything to be stable for my school. So I'm doing 4 days work, 3 days school, like 2 days school and like 1 day off. So getting much more busier, but I'm happy to jump in. It was good seeing you.
Nice.
Cheers.
Have a good one.
Man.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah, thanks. You all too. Take care.
I shall catch you later.
See you, buddy. Don't work too hard.
Yeah, I'll try.
Yeah. No, Yeah, I think to me, it's just one of those bits. It's fun. I mean, I'm playing around with chilies. It's a good laugh. I think there is definitely a market for the, oh yeah, have a play with these. And there's also a market for, I've spent a lot of time and effort stabilizing this out. And here you go. If you want this, pay me accordingly, so to speak. But who knows? We'll see where that goes. Hopefully it'll eventually get there. It's still early days.
Yeah, you just need to have like a really fresh video where you do some hot dab hits, maybe drop some songs and get some cool bags, and you'll crush all your competitive breeders.
Make sure it's on TikTok.
Yeah, that's right. 5 posts every day.
Yeah. Fucking crazy, man. All about the being seen rather than actually any kind of substance, which is frustrating.
Okay, but that's normal, isn't it? That's just the world we live. And now that we've been used to being like, we've had the romanticism of being outlaws, of being, and the pain in the ass and the risks of being outlaws and outcasts. But now we're getting included in the fold. Like I said, Grateful Dead's got a deal. Everyone's making deals. So, but this is part of coming into the fold, is they're going to fold us into and expect us to go by the regular rules of capitalism. And they're not going to, I guess for us as a community, we always felt there was something different, something special. Stoners are nice to each other, et cetera, et cetera. They take care of each other, whatever. Turns out we're just people without it being illegal.
Yeah. But you'll find that Grateful Dead don't want to put their name to something that's not good, and
one would hope.
Or any of these big brands don't want to put their names to something that, if it keeps changing, they're not interested in it.
I think some of the big differences, like Britain, like I keep saying, I think you guys are going to go anytime now. But Britain is famously a nation of gardeners. Like they've got that as a habit of just people doing that in general. Now, true, it doesn't have the same kind of numbers as the United States, but it's already a cultural thing to be a gardener.
Yeah, it's definitely over here. People are into their gardening. I think, as we had a discussion a while ago, I think it's a lot to do with the fallout, also the ongoing thing from the war days, where everybody got to grow their own food and whatnot. So there is this sort of vested interest in it.
So something that was originally done out of necessity.
Yeah. But it's certainly something that's stuck around. An Englishman, in his garden is like, there's 1,001 jokes and comments about that kind of stuff. Yeah, so one of the other bits, the subject matter for the show was the spectral discussion and getting into sort of where is stuff going and what can we be doing with some ways of monitoring your grow. Talk about a real change of direction. But I find it interesting in terms of there are these ways and means of monitoring your grow, and it doesn't just have to be cannabis, it can be anything. How do you understand if plants are healthy and relatively inexpensive? How can you tell if you're inexpensively, how can you do this? We go through monitoring environment, and having done that side of it with temperature and humidity monitoring and getting into VPD, how many people actually pay attention to temperature and humidity? Really, that's something I discovered, is I think a lot of people like to talk about it, but very few actually do it at the end of the day. And then when you get outside, that gets even more difficult, because you certainly are not able to control temperature and humidity in an outdoor environment. So, you know, what is a good way of being able to look at your plants and understand, are they healthy? Are they being stressed? If you've only got one or two, it's fine. But if you're in like, you know, got hundreds of these things, it becomes a little bit more difficult, especially if they're like in amongst all the others. And one way of actually doing this is with spectral analysis. And in particular, the concept of NDVI, which stands for Normalized Vegetative Difference Index, which is a bit of a mouthful. And what that really is, let me see if I can share this properly. Let me know if this looks okay or if it tears it for whatever reason. For some reason, the NVIDIA driver's done something weird. So what this is a way of being able to look at plants and understand if they're photosynthesizing and are in a healthy state and are unstressed, etc., based on the absorption and the reflection of near-infrared spectrum, or near-infrared light on the spectrum. And what is actually really interesting is almost every single digital camera, well, I think they all do actually, has to have a near-infrared filter put onto them to stop them being detecting too much of it. There's actually, if you look at a lot of them, if you pop them open, get in and look at the lens, there's a little film over it that you can take off, and it'll suddenly allow all the infrared light to come through. It's not so much just the near infrared, it's the full infrared spectrum comes through, and will give things a slightly pink hue as a result. So we all actually have, and these little cameras are inexpensive, really inexpensive. We all have a way of being able to actually do this. And looking at this chart here, what it's showing is that chlorophyll absorption is within this visible light range. It's absorbing red, but it reflects near infrared. And that's what gets interesting in being able to monitor and detect is how much red is in an image and how much near infrared is in the image. And that's all that this calculation is doing. Is it says, well, let's monitor how much near infrared there is, subtract how much red there is, and then divide that by how much near infrared there is over plus how much red there is. Okay, this just means that the calculation will always be between 1 and -1. It's the values you get back. The closer to 1 you have, in other words, if there's very little red being reflected, then it's basically going to be near infrared over near infrared. So you're going to get something that's closer to 1. The more red that's being reflected, it becomes a negative value. So it starts to go towards 0 or towards -1. And what you'll see happening in plants is when they get stressed and they stop photosynthesizing, they start to absorb the near infrared spectrum. They don't reflect it anymore. So anything that's plants that are in a really like healthy state, they're unstressed, they're not dry, they've been, they've got enough nutrients, they're photosynthesizing away quite happily, they're reflecting a huge amount of the near infrared, and you can actually pick up on that and detect that. And it's quite interesting to watch how quickly it kicks in. So here are just a few examples. This is literally when the lights have just turned on. I think this image got captured at probably about, the lights have probably been on for about 10 seconds or so before the image got captured. And what you can see is, I don't know how clear this is, Magma GMF, let me know. What you're seeing here is everything that's red is not currently photosynthesizing, and it's absorbing all of the near infrared along with the red spectrum. So we're not getting much near infrared being reflected. So this is, as the lights come on, the plant's literally trying to get going. Photosynthesis hasn't quite kicked in yet. It has in some parts of it, but it hasn't all over the place yet. And then literally that's it 10 minutes later. Photosynthesis has now really gotten going. It's fired up, and you can see how much more near infrared is being reflected. And it's just using false coloring to reflect it. I've showed up as green, which is why it looks the way it does. What's interesting is you can see bud sites don't photosynthesize so much, so they're all sitting in this red piece. And then you can see there's bits of the leaves that aren't necessarily photosynthesizing that well. Some tip burn, I guess. And this was on a different day, same thing. Took the plants a little bit longer to get going, but literally 10 minutes after the lights come on, you get back to this. And here you can see, actually, I do recall, I think that this plant was starting to dry out a bit. You can see there's a leaf down the bottom here that's all scrunched up, and that's definitely not photosynthesizing. It's gone bright red. But there's more, if you look between that image, in fact, there you see that leaf starting to go. And this image, you can see conditions, certainly plants are probably stressing out a bit all of a sudden. This one here as well, it's not photosynthesizing quite as well as you'd hope it to do. And the interesting thing is, if you're doing this over a large area, you can suddenly spot, hang on, that plant over there is having a problem. Let me go and have a look at it. It's not necessarily going to tell you what the problem is, but you're going to be able to understand how well the plants are actually doing. You're also able to tell how well your lights are doing, and that's an interesting piece, because if they don't get the right spectrum, they don't photosynthesize at their full potential, and it shows up almost instantly under this sort of spectral analysis. And here it is again done slightly differently. In fact, I think, when is this? The 5th. So this is NDVI. The other one was enhanced NDVI, which is done. This one works better with like regular cameras rather than like special spectral cameras. NDVI works particularly for spectral ones. And here you can see everything that's blue is just 100% absorbing all of the infrared light that's coming through. But 10 minutes later, it's a whole different story. And this washing it out in green is just because of how much is being reflected back is what's causing that.
So is there any way that you could have them turn green quicker by like changing the temperature before you turn the light on? Or
oh, I mean, it's only because this camera is capturing an image every 10 minutes. If it did it a minute after the lights came on, you'd see.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they turn on quick. I mean, if they're getting the right spectrum, they ramp up really fast. It's one of those interesting.
No, continue. No, sorry.
I mean, so it was an interesting experiment to do. I wish I still had the images from doing it. Was a fairly low powered, was a 75 watt HPS bulb and a 25 watt LED panel. And you put on just the 75 watt HPS bulb and you look at the plants under this and they're all like pretty much red. And then you switch on the LED panel, which just brings in, because all that the HPS is pretty much doing is producing infrared. It's not really at that low wattage. It's not generating enough of the rest of the spectrum. 80% of its spectrum is infrared. And then you put on this low powered LED next to it that all it's producing is the other part of the spectrum with none of the infrared. And the plants within 30 seconds go from red to glowing green because they're now getting the spectrum that they're after to allow them to photosynthesize. And when you switch off the HPS bulb and it suddenly drops all the infrared that it was getting, you do see it dip because it's only a 25 watt LED panel, but you do see that it does change it, but not as dramatically as adding in the correct spectrum from the LED panel complemented with the infrared from the HPS. And I think that's where, in terms of a lighting solution, we're probably getting the best mix, is something that produces a higher amount of infrared spectrum without having to worry about anything else. Just give me a chunk of infrared because it helps with leaf temperature, and then give me the rest of the spectrum I'm interested in from the LED lights without wasting energy on infrared. And the rest of the spectrum that the LED is giving you is the rest that it needs to get photosynthesis going, because infrared's just getting leaf temperature up to the right temperature for the chemical reaction to take place. The light spectrum provided by the LED is what's actually making photosynthesis kick in. And I mean, you can see it. It's night and day. It's quite dramatic.
And how does it change if it's hot or cold?
You can see, well, what's in you can tell if you've got your environment dialed in. So if it gets hot and dry, you'll notice it. But if you can keep the VPD in check, so the plant's transpiring correctly, and photosynthesis therefore carries on at its optimal rate. I think if it gets too warm, you'll start to see it dip off, because the chemical reaction is optimal at a certain temperature range, and as soon as you get beyond the minimum maximum of that temperature range, it starts to deteriorate a bit. So you can tell, and that's the beauty behind this, is, as I say, it won't tell you what's wrong, but you can see fairly quickly that something with that plant over there is not doing well, and is worth going over and investigating. Did that actually go up on? I think I'm just behind on the channel. I am way behind. And so that, yeah, that's where it's interesting. Is if I want to monitor it at quite a large area, or I've got stuff that's outside, you can literally rig cameras up on top of poles overlooking entire big grows and monitoring them that way. And you could go, I need to go and see what's wrong with that plant over there. In a huge indoor grow, the plant that's being dripper fed and the dripper on the plant in the middle is blocked. This will show up almost within a few hours that that thing's struggling, before it starts to collapse over and you realize there's a problem with the plant. You'd be able to spot issues in amongst it all.
And could you use it to automate the room so it would have the right action?
I guess you probably could. I think it also very helpful to understand if your lights are doing what they're supposed to do. I think stuff like this would probably scare lighting manufacturers, because you can now look at the plants and understand, okay, well, your lights don't put out the right spectrum because the plants don't don't hit their full potential in photosynthesis under your lights. Or do I need to change my lights, because I can see over time, I can monitor imagery over time and see a degradation in photosynthesis between when I bought a new bulb and 6 months later, 8 months later, whatever the case may be. Just having a quick look at some of the comments here. Tasmanian Devil. Yep. Cameras definitely help.
I'd say ultimately most of us end up relying just on being consistent. And for example, like you mentioned, VPD, I think once most people know that they're staying within range, they don't look at it anymore unless something changes. I think same thing with this. I like the idea that it is real-time information, because it will let you know, because for all of us, our best friend is typically just consistency. That's how we protect our gardens.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just looking at some of the questions here from Tasmanian Devil. It would be interesting to see far red, and if we go back to the plant, I mean, that might wake the plant up, the far red spectrum. I'll share this again. So although shortwave, you know, you get near infrared. Yeah, it's always confusing. What's far red? So it has your wavelength. I mean, anything out here, it's just not, the plant's not interested in it. But it's not to say that in terms of photosynthesis, it's not interested in it. The only bit that it's this is the range that's particularly important for photosynthesis being taking place between 0.4 and 0.8, I guess, 0.7. But that's very specific to photosynthesis, whether or not it's going to react to that spectrum in terms of waking it up, because that's what the sun pumps out as it rises and as it sets. It's the last sort of like pulse that goes out. You might be able to see that when the lights come on, it reacts a little bit quicker to it. But plants also tend to get into a bit of a cycle from what I've seen. So they almost know when the lights are going to come on and when the lights are going to go off. And I think it's a different thing. It's not photosynthesis that you're trying to control, or plant health that you're trying to control with the far red. It's that you're actually trying to make it go to sleep quicker by having it come on just before the lights go off, so that you don't have this delay in that the 12-12 kicking. And that's why plants outdoors will start to flower at 14 hours because it's still light outside, but the sun's set. But as the sun sets, you get that far red pulse that kind of just shuts them down. And that's what that spectrum in the lights, from my understanding at least, I do stand to be correct, that's what that's trying to simulate. At the same way, it kind of wakes them up a bit quicker as well. But I could be wrong on that. Quite happy
I'm interested
to be corrected.
Magma, is this something you could potentially use on a larger scale by putting up like a larger scale camera outdoors for doing fruits and stuff as well, for doing, you know, large scale agriculture?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for monitoring like the watering lines, if there's like a section that has a problem in a large area, it's really useful.
And in terms of large area, the NDVI index was introduced as for those world plant health monitoring that you see. You know, there's images, that false color images of the planet where you see it, you know, green areas and red areas, etc. So they can do this monitoring, oddly enough. Well, not oddly enough. I mean, it was designed for being able to do it from space. And you can go in and have a look at, and it's free. That's the other amazing thing. So much satellite data is actually free. So as an example.
Well, and if you wanted something closer than satellite data, you couldn't, by what you're saying, this is a pretty normal function of the camera. Couldn't you do it with a drone camera?
You need to peel the filter off it. Yeah, but yes, you could do it. Yeah. I mean, the camera that I'm using for doing this stuff with is about, yeah, you know, yay big. I'm kind of, yeah, that sort of size. It's tiny and is really, really small and light. In fact, I mean, that's in a case, it's about that big, which is, I'm showing you like a battery pack. It's probably no bigger than a credit card. And I'm trying, do I have one lying around in here? No, I don't, unfortunately. But so if you have a look, here's the web address. I'll actually put that into the chat. You can go and have a play around with this from the Sentinel Hub, which has got a number of different satellites that you can pick from. The newer ones are the Sentinel-2 satellites, and they are capturing images, obviously from space. It's pretty much real time. We can go to today. So, okay, 3 days ago is when they last had an image update for this particular area. So it's pretty close to real time, and you know, oddly enough, let's see, quite a bit of cloud cover on that day. We want one where there's not much cloud cover. Here we go. beautiful clear day. And you can then have a look at the vegetative index. And what's quite interesting here is you can see the farms. All of them are in green. All of this is absorbing red and reflecting near infrared. And in fact, it actually shows you here what the calculation is: B8 minus B4 over B8 plus B4, which is the NDVI calculation. So near infrared minus red over near infrared plus red. Everything that's either red or blues or yellows is absorbing infrared. In fact, you can see the C over here absorbs pretty much all infrared. So in this case, anything that's red is absorbing all of the infrared light. Water doesn't reflect infrared. So here, you know, at this sort of scale, you can have a look and see what's going on. And as I said, you can go pretty much anywhere with this and have a look. Pick somewhere, I don't know, I'm just going. Yeah, this,
you have to sign in to use it, right?
No, absolutely free. I'll post the link up in
That's what I said, just based on the kind of granularity you want in your data. You could take it all the way down to, you know, like you demonstrated on a personal level, you should take it down to the individual plant level or go all the way up to the satellite level.
Yeah. So you can have a look at, you know, if you happen to be a farmer, this is great for being able to monitor your fields and see what's happening in your local area. And they've got a whole bunch of different spectral analysis indices that they're doing. Like you'll see this one that I've selected, which is a kind of the water one. Water index, all the water shows up as blue, so you can really quickly see where all the moist areas are, where there's pools of water. Shows it up really, really nicely. Yeah, this is what it looks like otherwise.
I'm gonna ask a question. How can we then use this kind of technology to make sure we're actually adapting to the rapidity of climate change? I mean, we just saw, I won't even get into how many different natural disasters have taken place, but is there any way we can use this data to make ourselves more resilient?
You can become proactive rather than reactive because it is real time. And you can stream, you know, if you were monitoring your own grow with one of these sort of cameras, little webcams, I mean, you'd monitor it in real time. I mean, you've got Tasmanian Devil's got the one from what would you say it was again, from AC Infinity. Now, if the AC Infinity, if you were to replace the AC Infinity camera with a near infrared one, you would be able to track it in real time and watch it in real time and go, okay, hang on, I need to go and take care of this now. And it's not the same as when you're doing environment monitoring, where it's like, but how is that impacting my plants? And if you combine, you know, okay, so the magic starts to happen when you say, well, let me take all the environmental data I'm capturing along with this visual spectral data that I'm capturing and combine the two together. So now I can see, you'll probably notice when things when your VPD starts to go out of whack, you'll see it affecting the plants. And then you go, okay, hang on, let me bring that back in line. Do I need to bump the humidity up? Do I need to drop the humidity? Do I need to alter the temperature? And you'll see the plants respond to the environmental changes you're making, because that's part of the problem is, you know, when I'm making these changes to the environment, how do I know what impact they're having on the plants? And I think that's actually where this gets super interesting, is you can now see, as I tweak the environment, I can actually quantitatively understand the impact it's having on the plants. If that makes, yeah, that does make sense. You know, so it becomes objective and not subjective anymore.
So if I go on the team, which one is it? that you're searching?
Theme? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm on the Sentinel hub trying to look on the
Oh,
map.
you want to go to the Sentinel playground, and then the vegetative index is the one to use. And satellite wise, what satellite was I using? Which is in the top right hand corner. I was using the Sentinel 2 L2A one. I mean, you can play around with all of them. I'm not quite sure what the difference is. I think it's just the track that they're on, and they do a complete global sweep every like 3 days. But yeah, on there, it's the Sentinel playground. It will pop up saying there's a new GUI to use. I think you can have a play around with it, but it is all free. You don't have to be logged in. I think if you log in and create an account, it just allows you to save and create some more custom indices or filters if you want to.
Yeah, no, I'll show you. Put a good link on your Instagram what filter to use.
And it does get, I mean, I was having a look at, like we had really hot weather and like drought last year, and you look at the country, you've got to pick a day where there's no cloud, because unfortunately cloud cover does fuck with this a bit. And you can see the impact of rainfall. It's all looking like shit, and then you go forward a few days where after it's rained, and boom, everything's bright green again. It's quite incredible to watch.
Yeah, no, it looks a bit complicated for me to begin now, but I'm sure with a few bumps in the right direction, I'll understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is quite interesting, and it's something that's been around for quite some time. I mean, it is tried and tested. It's by no means something new. This has been around for a very long time, and there's all sorts of indices that you can actually start to play around with. There's a green leaf index, which allows you to then track how fast a plant's growing, because it'll calculate how much green there actually is in the image, and you can track plant growth and coverage over time all of a sudden. So you can get an idea as to how well your plants are actually doing and how fast they're growing.
Yeah, no, it looks really cool.
So yeah, I think that's, and you can start to combine this with AI. Things get interesting. Yeah, for it to be.
I had a feeling it had to lead back there.
Everything
I know
eventually
you.
leads back there. Yeah, what were you saying?
It all leads back to the AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to get more and more that way. In terms of it being an assistant, it doesn't replace you, but it certainly helps you understand what's going on.
Yeah, no, I'm sure most companies are like trying to find the AI product to release to boost stocks.
Yeah, and the interesting thing will be, as I said, if you take your temperature data, this kind of visual data, along with you recording your observations of why things happened, and that's what it needs. It needs some kind of input training material. It'll get, the AI can get good enough so that as long as it's got a feed of, okay, here's all the environmental data I'm getting, but he has also the visual data I'm getting. Based on what you've told me in the past, I can tell you what's actually going on. That thing is suffering from a mite infestation. spider mites. This one's got root gnat, because it, that's what you went in, you did your observation as to why that one plant and amongst all the others looked weird. Things that we wouldn't be able to pick up on, it can, and it would be able to understand and go, all right, given the 2 weeks of historical data I've just seen, the weather forecast and the weather that's been going on, and this image, you're going to get powdery mildew in 3, 2, 1. You've got it. But the thing is, it could give you a heads up 2 weeks in advance to say you want to make some changes, because if this carries on in 2 weeks' time, you're going to have powdery mildew, or you're going to have bud rot, or you're going to have this. It can actually work that out for you.
Or if you're working outside, it would let you take some sort of prophylactic measure.
Yeah.
You can't necessarily change the humidity or whatever, but you could potentially make some sort of adjustment with, foliar application or something.
Yeah, precisely.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, like, how, just assuming like on a small acreage of land, how would this make you produce more effectively? Are you going to be able to just use less water? Are you going to be able to know when you're watering most effectively? Where is the data really going to pay off economically?
It will you'll have less waste, because you'll be able to spot issues long before they have become serious. And let's say in terms of cannabis, it can pick up when they start to senesce. So as fall colors kick in, photosynthesis just grinds to a halt.
So
and you can see that plant's ready to be harvested, that one's ready to be harvested. So you can get timings down a lot better. And by
just use it as a security against drying out also? It's like a drought monitor?
Oh yeah, as they start to dry out, they start to absorb more and more and more of the near infrared spectrum, because photosynthesis starts to suffer. Anything that starts to affect the plant health gets picked up.
So could you have like a percentage of the plants starting to turning on the watering, or?
So long as that was the cause of it, yeah, absolutely. And then that's where the combination with, initially what you would be doing is going out, you'd be looking at the video feed or the imagery coming in of the whole acre, or whatever it is that you're looking at, or just a small little 2-3 plants that you're looking at, and going, that one plant's not doing well, it looks different to all the others, its NDVI index is off compared to all the other ones, let me go and have a look at it. Oh, it's bone fucking dry. And you recorded that and fed that back into the observed data for the algorithm to learn from. Next time it sees that particular droop of the plant along with the NDVI index tanking, it'll go, oh, hang on, potential issue with that plant is it's drying out.
And is it more reliable than, let's say, a water sensor in the ground?
Just what I was going to say.
Yes, because the difference is, let's say you've got 1,000 plants in pots in a grow room. You don't put a water sensor into every single pot. So in terms of commercial efficiency and viability, it's much more cost effective.
Efficiency.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And it picks up on a broader range of potential issues than just it's drying out.
And could you have, like, let's say one of the plants start drying out after a certain amount of time, watering goes on, because that now it's going to start to take damage? Or
so long as you can water that one plant specifically. I mean, this is kind of per plant observation that you're doing. What it's probably going to give you is the heads up that the dripper to that plant is blocked, or the feed line to that plant is blocked.
Yeah, or
which
it's bigger,
you may
more.
not. Yeah, and the same goes if you overwater it and the plant gets waterlogged, the root system starts to drown, photosynthesis grinds to a halt again, because it's stressing out, and as soon as it stresses out, it doesn't photosynthesize.
Would it be able to recognize the pattern of how it stops absorbing or reflecting and tell you what's wrong?
So long as you've collected enough of the corresponding information, it should be able to give you a, yeah, I'm loath to say yes, it can definitely do that, but what it would do is it would go, look, of all the potential issues, this is the one that has the highest potential of being the problem. You know,
human beings always going to have to intervene.
If it knows what your watering schedule is, and it's going, okay, it doesn't matter what this thing is, there's something wrong here. You know, it's either it's getting overwatered or it's being underwatered.
Right, I have a question
to see if it expressed differently.
Yeah. What would this thing reflect on just bare ground? Like say we want to observe
just soil, it would be
like on that tell the moisture level in it.
The more moist the soil is, the more infrared it absorbs. So yeah, you can tell if the soil is dry or if it's wet.
It just has to be calibrated appropriately. Okay.
Well, no, as it heads towards values below 0 would indicate that it's wet, if you know that it's soil that you were looking at. But then they have specific calculations that can be done to pick up on actual soil, oddly enough. So there's, I mean, that's the beauty about looking at the spectrum, is different things absorb it in different ways. So long as you know what the calculation is that you need to do, you can have it show up different things. You could remove like all the green from the image and just show me bare soil, and I could actually track, well, how much bare soil am I seeing between the leaves?
Well, and you could track, say, compost. Instead of having a thermometer inserted, you could actually track compost with a camera this way to see how much moisture is coming in and out of it, obviously temperature, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a thermal camera, so it won't do temperature.
Well, right, but you could add a thermal camera. You could, it's just being able to not use a probe, because probes are what degrade.
Yeah, and probes monitor one point. This can look at
and this could be
a large area.
like you have those cameras where they do the football screens, where you have like 2 wires, and then it moves freely in that grid, you know.
I mean, you could put it up on a. I mean, as I said, these cameras are tiny and they're really, really light. For inexpensively for a farm, you could literally fly on a kite looking down over a farm. It records everything to an SD card, pop the SD card out, read off the SD card.
I don't think it would be hard though to have it like on like, you know what I mean, like they do the cameras in the football arenas.
Yeah,
well, a lot of people have decent drones now. Just they're buying them for hobbies, just for fun to fly them. Like
and
RC
you don't
cars.
need to go and buy one of those super expensive spectral cameras for your, because that's the thing is you can buy ones, specific spectral cameras that probably pick up on a much wider range of spectrum. You don't need one of those. You can buy a little hobbyist drone, as you say, and just slap one of these cameras on the bottom and fly it up and down your field and you're done. Or if you're growing indoors, you just attach them below your lights. You don't put them above the lights, you fit them just below the lights, or on these LED strips, and what you can fit them between the lights. And the camera is quite a wide angle lens, so if you've got all your lights up in the ceiling, you could just put, depending on the size of the area you wanted to cover, you put a few of these cameras in. And when I say inexpensive, we're talking probably $20 a camera, so you can go and put a whole bunch of them in, and mix them with ones that have the infrared filter removed and ones that don't have the infrared filter removed. So you get a natural image and you get the infrared image at the same time. And you can use both of those together. So you can cover a really large area. And the fact is, on an indoor grow, they're permanently in place. They're recording things, it's streaming the video. So you literally can watch it in real time. you could see if a water line burst and was flooding the place, because you just get this great big black pool appearing across the floor, and that's the water pouring out of wherever it's coming from, because it's absorbing all the infrared.
That fucking fish tank broke again.
Yep.
Oh, the notorious fish tank.
Yep. It's either broken or you've got fish soup when you get home, because the thermometer in there broke and it just started to boil the water.
And then the neighbor feels really bad. Sorry for you. You're like, oh, all the fish are dead.
We're eating sushi tonight.
Oh. Yeah, I had a few reservoirs go to the neighbor beneath.
I learned my lesson. I learned my lesson early. Even if I have just a little cloner now, it goes inside another tub.
You need to have at least 1,000 liter or 250 gallon tank to make it fun.
No. If I get anything that big, I'm burying it outside.
That's when the fun starts, when the neighbors say it's a lot of water dripping through the roof. Oh. Yeah, leaks aren't fun. Not at all.
Well, and this does bring up, some interesting things that, I mean, not only if you're outdoors on a commercial level, could this be pretty useful? If you're indoors on a commercial level, this could be absolutely vital just to be able to monitor a place with low labor while you're not there. Whether it's just your hoop houses or whatever.
Yeah, or if you if you're able to get there close, it could be like the telltale sign to get you to be there at the right time.
Yeah. You're talking about, that's the kind of thing where you could actually, the AI could learn, oh, hang on, if I start to see a big black puddle appearing, I'm going to send you a message. You've got a leak. Something's gone wrong.
That's when Pete, the watering bot, shows up. Clean up the mess or water the plants.
Yeah, that's where the shop vac that gets switched on and it just starts to suck it all up as quickly as possible.
Haven't you seen the new robot cleaner? They're gonna connect it to water in and water out.
No.
So you could pretty much just take away the brushes and you could use it as like a watering bot.
That'd be interesting. I haven't seen that. But yeah, as I was mentioning earlier, the other great thing is telling you when it's ready to harvest things. Which of your plants are ready to go, because you can see them senescing.
Well, and there are a few all-in-one grow cabinets out there that are supposed to be all-in-one things. You put it in there and basically let it go. But this could give that a whole new dimension of possibility.
Yeah. And you can put them, above, and you can put them side on. As I say, it's not mentioned. The cool thing about it is it's not monitoring. The cool thing, it's not monitoring temperature and humidity. It's actually just monitoring plant health. How well are these things doing? And when you combine out of, the one image that gets captured, you can run multiple spectral analysis algorithms against it. So you can do the plant health, you can do the green leaf index at the same time. So you can also now track how fast are my plants growing. And you can see when they slow down or when they're growing really, really quickly, because of how much green is literally visible against how much bare ground is visible below it, for example. So you can see if the nutrients that you're feeding it are having the impact you're wanting them to have. You can also, as you saw in that image, bud sites don't photosynthesize. You can almost start to see, well, how many bud sites are there, and you can watch them develop over time.
You can train it to look for almost
cool.
anything.
Yeah. And in terms of where you can get these cameras, these are actually little Raspberry Pi cameras, no infrared, well, no NO noir cameras, NOIR, no infrared filter, Raspberry Pi cameras. Let me see if I can find a link for. And the bit is you need to have the software to take the image and then run the analysis on the image. But that's, okay, I say that's like next to nothing because I'm a developer. But it's relatively easy to do. I'd quite happily help somebody put something together. Yeah. Well, I wrote the software for doing it because it's just a formula.
But you don't have like a sender receiver that you could connect and have it send it to a cell phone, like let's say like a solar camera that you don't need internet for. Could you do that?
Well, it still needs it needs a Wi-Fi connection because it needs to send it to your camera, for example.
You can't do it with like a SIM card.
Yeah, but that's still Wi-Fi. I mean, if it's got a SIM card in it, it has to send a signal somewhere.
GSM.
It's so long as it sends the image somewhere, then the image gets analyzed, and you look at the analyzed image. Yeah, it's not.
So go to a server maybe, and then get sent to the app or something like that.
Dude, we can buy here pretty inexpensive trail cameras that'll go right to your cell phone. Most of them, like back in the day, they all used flashcards and stuff, but now they'll go right to your cell phone.
Yeah, and can you get that, you think, with this kind of cameras?
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, so this is, I guess, a slightly techie bit, but, in terms of these are all the different indices I can run on a single image. There's a whole lot of different ones. So you've got green leaf indexed, green difference vegetation, but this is all the code. I mean, it's not much. I mean, that's it. It's, from there to, in fact, it's not even from there to there because that's doing the animation part. That's all the code that gets run that pulls this image in, and reads it, and then does what it needs to do with it. So it's relatively, lightweight, not much code that gets run for doing this stuff because it is just a calculation. As it's showing here, it's near infrared minus visible infrared over near infrared plus visible infrared. It's not tricky. This can then take it and post the image up to a server somewhere that you're viewing it on your phone. You could actually incorporate it because the camera attaches to this tiny little Raspberry Pi Zero, which is a tiny little Pi that has Wi-Fi built into it. You could look at it directly if you wanted to, and it can just do the image analysis on the fly.
And Bluetooth, does it have that?
Some of them do have Bluetooth, but then you've got to be in range of it. So that's a bit annoying.
So for like daily logging, it would be good with the Bluetooth.
Yeah, although it's got a card on the camera, and you can tell it how long you want it to record images on the camera for. And you can put a 128 gig card in the camera, and you could probably record a year's worth of data, depending on the resolution you want to capture it at. And then you can animate it. Between. Yeah. But I mean, the thing is, you can just pull it down every single day. Or you can have it just stream it to your web page. So this is what it looks like when it's streaming it. So that's a live image of one of these cameras, and you'll see it's like really red because it's got the near infrared filter removed. So all that infrared comes through and it hits the red sensor, which makes it look redder than it really is. And this camera is rigged up between the lights looking down. And then as I said, you can animate it. I think I've done a few of those where I've shown animations of, in fact, on the Operation Grow Show YouTube channel, I'm putting together a time-lapse series of them so you can actually see it over time watch it in real time as it grows, which is interesting. Well, not real time, it's, you know, historically done.
It'd be interesting to see like somebody do like a side-by-side run where they do one with their own intuition and another one where they follow this, and see which one gives the best result.
Yeah, it would be. I think it'll be the one where if there's a problem, that's where it gets interesting. You know, who picks up on the issue quicker?
Yeah.
That to me is where it gets the most interesting. Oh, these have become more expensive.
Aside from like the commercial app or semi-commercial larger applications, on the small application, this would allow you to potentially intentionally stress a plant while still keeping it safe, right? Kind of like being able to monitor its vitals.
Really good for drybacks.
Kind of what I was thinking.
Or for like doing crop steering and pushing the limits.
If you wanted to really stress the plant on purpose by either drying it out or what have you.
Yeah, or seeing like what's the limit like on each plant, like what temperature and what humidity range do they start to produce changes.
Yeah. And when you've got your environment properly dialed in, so you could then say, okay, so for this particular part, it likes it a little bit warmer, it likes it a little bit drier, this one likes it a little bit cooler, a little bit wetter, more humid, etc.
Huh. And I would say previous generations, you know, when you would see people do sealed indoor grows, that's when you would get excessive temperatures coupled with CO2 input, because you could take advantage of an increased metabolic rate and increased temperatures by adding additional CO2. So that would be interesting to see what you could do with that, like how you could monitor that. Not that I would ever do that, just because I don't like having to seal things up and supplement, but that would be interesting.
Yeah.
So that's where the brewing and the mushroom growing comes in to get your CO2.
And you'd be able to see it as the CO2 that I'm providing actually making any fucking difference. Because I think those mushroom bags do not do a damn thing. They don't produce enough CO2.
I hear you making an experiment. Let's get you a mushroom bag.
Oh, and just put a CO2 monitor in for that one.
Yeah, it smells a lot when you're brewing beer in there.
I've done grows where when I was doing, I've made like home fermentation. You would literally take high alcohol tolerant yeast. Just make sure you have a trap and just bubble it through and pump it straight out. I think that probably produces more CO2 than a mushroom bag does. But unless you're doing it in a completely sealed environment, if you're venting that room in any way whatsoever, it's just a waste of time. Because it all just gets sucked out.
Bringing the heat.
Yeah, and I just still think, I don't know. These are starting to make things like this type of camera and analysis, along with other bits, really add some empirical and objective data to a lot of these ideas of, oh, crank the heat up, crank the CO2 up, da 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 da. Well, actually, let me see what effect that's actually having on the plants.
But can you like you can take it around without being connected to Wi-Fi and use it, and then connect it to Wi-Fi and upload the material?
Yeah. Doesn't have to be connected to Wi-Fi. It'll fire up and just start recording straight to the card on the camera.
Yeah.
Well, on the Raspberry Pi. Yeah.
And then you have to take it to a place where it's Wi-Fi to connect it.
Or just pop the card out, and you can then read off the card. You can connect directly to the unit as well. Some of them will allow you to, they'll run like as a little access point, and you can just connect directly to it.
With the phone?
Yeah, via Wi-Fi. Yeah.
Oh.
And then it's just a little web page that it runs a little web server on the Raspberry Pi that's showing you the screen. Again, you just have to write some software. I mean, it's still in that sort of like hacker community. I say hacker community, I mean in terms of hack the solution together for yourself. But as I showed, it's a very small amount of code that needs to be run. It can be run on. It doesn't require a large amount of compute power at all. I find what I do is, I mean, I can put my code up on GitHub. That's not a problem. But the thing is, it's one of those where, yeah, I'm surprised there isn't a low-cost commercial solution that's come out for doing it. And I'm leveraging free software for doing this. There's a free piece of software that runs on the Raspberry Pi that does the live webcam stuff. In fact, it will do, if there's too much movement, it'll send a message so it can pick up, intrusion detection or whatever you want to call it. It's got that built into it. It can actually send images and send them through to a Google shared drive somewhere. Then you could look at them there and then run the analysis on them afterwards. Or you could run software natively on the thing and have it do it all locally for you. Yeah, it doesn't take, he says it doesn't take much to do it, but it doesn't take too much to do it.
No, it looks really cool.
So yeah, let's see. Are there any other questions in that coming through from chat? Hopefully people found it interesting. Maybe I should do a poll. So yeah, what else has been happening in everybody's neck of the woods?
I see that there's a static shift separator on the market
For Keith?
For 99 pure heads.
So not using baking paper around a DVD case and sliding it over it.
No, it's an electrostatic separator. It's from, I was going to see, I have the company name here, I think. It's from...
See, that's definitely one of those interesting things about what the legalization does. And I think that's a bit that interests me maybe more than actually growing the plants myself would be, it's all these little ancillary businesses that sit around it that suddenly fire up, all these little ideas that come around. It's like the guy that's selling pickaxe handles to gold miners.
Sambo Creek Filtration is the company. And I think the guy in it was on Hash Church or Legends of Hashish or something from Bubble Man yesterday or a day or two ago, and having a big talk about it. So I think stuff like that's going to change a lot, because like you were saying with the brewing industry, how they get like a consistent result. Some of these machines are like really good for large scale extractions with high quality, and I think it's going to be harder and harder to compete with some of the tech once it gets more and more normal.
And the interesting thing is that the tech lowers the barrier to entry to be able to produce consistent high quality output.
Of course.
That I see as being particularly beneficial. I'm really surprised like with this camera thing, why lighting companies, why a bunch of LED companies haven't introduced it into their lights so that they can actually use that as a you can see what our lights are doing piece.
Answer is very simple and straightforward, because consumers have not demanded it. The minute a consumer starts demanding the thing, they will provide it. But if consumers don't demand it, they won't.
And could you connect that to like a diode grid, and it would adjust the diodes up and down accordingly to get like the right intensity?
What it could do is it could sit there and play with them until the plants were like, it could alter them so that it reached optimal. Yes, I mean, it essentially, yes, it could dynamically adjust your lights to.
Because now you can adjust the whole lamp, you know, but if this could do like individual diodes on the whole lamp, so it wouldn't have like one intensity, it'd have like a certain intensity on each diode to perfectly fit like how the canopy below is, you know.
Exactly. I mean, that is where it does get super interesting, is at that kind of level of control, where it's going, okay, well, let me turn on a couple of HPS lights, because let's see if that makes a change. Well, that had a positive impact, so let's keep them on the LED panel. Let me now play around with the spectrum off the LED panel. I can increase it even more. That's optimal. And as it starts to see it fade away or whatever, it can make the adjustments, and it'll start to learn how to adjust the lights to keep photosynthesis running at an optimal level. And then also notify you that, hey, something's wrong, everything is just tanking, you need to come in here and have a look.
Yes, so then suddenly the lights become a sensor for health of the plant and how they perform themselves.
Yeah, I mean, as having that as part of integrated into your control system, as another input into the control loop, where it's not just turning things on and off, but intelligently turning bits and pieces on and off and adjusting spectrums. Absolutely, that gets, yeah.
And you're not working with any like big Israeli companies on this yet? It's coming soon.
Not yet. Yeah. See me next week when we're sponsored. But I mean, I would work with any light company and go, yeah, let's
yeah, but it's interesting because you have some places, you know, where it's like I feel like it's most research driven, and they work with a lot of agricultural industries already. Like Valoja, I see, is a company, I think it's from Finland, and they do a lot of really cool LED stuff. But then you have other companies, you know, that are like really well marketed, but maybe they have owners in the industry, so maybe the representation of science isn't as fair, you know, maybe as it should be.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about this technology is no one person can like patent a solution for this, because it's public domain. It's like, here is the formula for it. You can capture the image yourself. Nobody can patent it. What they can do is bundle it up into something that's nice and easy to use, and make it available to everybody, rather than just those who tinker with stuff. I guess it's like LED lights. You can go and make them, you can build them yourself, or you can go to an LED light manufacturer and buy the lights directly from them. But yeah, I would love to see this included in, because it helps to back up the claims that they're making. And you soon discover that it's not all about how much light it's pushing out. It has to be in the right spectrum, because if it's not, they just don't react to it. You can shine whatever you like, whatever intensity you like at it. If it's not what the plant wants, the plant tells you pretty damn fucking quickly. And I've done ones where I've pointed the camera out the window and waited for sunrise, and you can see as the sun comes up, boom, everything just goes, reacts to it. At sunset, you watch it all switch off, turn off again.
And I imagine you could save a lot of energy.
If they're photosynthesizing at optimum rate, why do you want to push more at it?
Well, I would think for light depth situations, for any place that's doing supplemental lighting, that would help. But especially places that are really where water is a premium, that's where it seems like it would pay off.
Yeah.
If you can water less.
I mean, it's not, again, it's the beauty is it's like full spectrum plant health that you're monitoring. One advantage is you can tell if you're underwatering really quickly. And as I said, that in a large commercial operation, I see it as being like invaluable because you can spot problems long before you could see it with the human eye. And other things that impact, because we're just talking about, okay, is it photosynthesizing? Does it reflect near infrared? But if it starts to get powdery mildew or something else is affecting it, you'll see, like, if root gnats are attacking it, that'll impact its ability because the plant's suddenly stressing out. It's not photosynthesizing properly because it's focusing elsewhere, and you'll be able to spot it straight away. So depending on how the spectrum is being reflected or absorbed would give you some indication as to what's going on, and it can learn that over time.
So PM could trigger like a heat rise in the room, and then you could know how long the plants could take that heat and then turn it back down, and you take care of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking more that I can tell that plant's got a powdery mildew infection long before I can see it.
Yeah.
Simply because the spectrum that's being reflected by that plant is different to everything else around it. So initially you won't know what it is. You need to go and have a look, but you then go, oh yeah, powdery mildew. And so then the system, you feed that back into the loop and it starts to go, oh yeah, there's an 80% chance that plant's got powdery mildew. And you confirm it and it gets better and better and better at doing it, when it's only 2 or 3 plants, it's probably less beneficial. It's more of an interesting, but when you're doing it commercially, or you've got a few grow rooms on the go, or greenhouses, or whatever the case may be, then it's interesting. And again, if you're going outdoors in polytunnels, you can't control the environment so much, so you need another way of tracking how healthy the plants are.
And also for measuring like what plants are the healthiest in certain environments. So even for breeding, it's quite efficient.
And I think you just demonstrated on the smallest scales.
I think you could probably see it on your peppers.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's not just for cannabis. That's the beauty. It's across the board. You've got fruit trees growing. Well, something attacks the fruit trees, you'll know about it pretty quickly.
Well, and I was saying, I think as you just demonstrated too, it's a good teaching tool. So you could use this as a very interesting way to get get gardeners to actually get better with their little plot, or get kids interested in it if they can look at it on their phone. It'd be, if they can see plants a little differently on their phone, that might be kind of fun for them.
I almost imagine this as like an app that you could have on your phone, and you could just turn on your camera like you do normally and walk around with it and see how everything is doing around you.
Yeah, people have tried to write algorithms for or formulas for being able to do it with normal images, ones that haven't had the infrared filters removed on, regular cameras. They're a little less accurate because it's not actually able to work out how much infrared is being absorbed, but it can see how much red is being reflected. So you can kind of insinuate what's going on.
And you couldn't add
but
the
it's
lens.
a little more difficult.
You couldn't add the lens to do it.
Not on a phone camera, no. You might get, I don't even know if there are any phone cameras out there that do it. I don't know, no, not that I'm aware of.
But could you connect like one of those small cams with just a chargeable battery to Bluetooth and just walk around with it and look?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've done it when I hooked it up to a battery pack and walked around the local park, just pointing it at different things just to have a look and see, what do plants look like, out in the wild, so to speak.
And you can see it as you walk on your phone?
In that case, I just was recording it to the SD card and then looked at it when I got home, but there's nothing stopping you hooking to, your camera can connect to the Wi-Fi point that the little Raspberry Pi puts up, and then you can see it in real time, what it's looking at.
Yeah, that'd be really cool to do like a walk around in the field in the morning, just check everything, get like the routine for that.
Yeah, or just a tall pole with the camera sitting on top of the pole and a wide angle lens on it, because you can get different, lens attachment, because it's the sensor that's had the infrared filter removed. So you can get a fisheye lens that you can screw onto the front of it, put it on a long pole, stick it at the top of the pole, and it's, at that point it's covering a huge area.
And the
you're not trying to look at things that, no,
the accuracy don't change with the height?
No, not at all.
Oh, nice.
You're not looking at things at like a leaf level. You're looking at it at, it's designed to, that formula was written, to look at things from space. So sticking on a pole, no, it has no negative impact at all.
It's just a reflection.
Yeah. And in fact, that's why you notice in that stuff I was showing you how it's like quite washed out, because so much is being reflected back and it's bouncing then off all the walls, etc.
Yeah, no, I could see it when I was looking on the images. Some places you could see that it was like this green around where the farms were. In areas that I know there's no plants.
So yeah, it's just looking at near infrared reflection, essentially, and how much red's being reflected as well. So like white surfaces tend to reflect near infrared and red at the same time. So a lot of those will show up as green. But that's why
we need to make near infrared great again.
But that's why you can do things like, you can combine them together. You can take one that, okay, we're getting into the nuts and bolts of playing around with images, but you can do a green leaf index. So it's just looking at the green that's coming back, and it does a segmentation. So it segments out everything that's green, uses that as a mask and applies it to the one that you're doing the NDVI analysis of. So everything that's outside of it, it just ignores, and it just shows you where within what's considered the green area. So the plants is the only bit that it's showing you. You've masked everything else out of the image, and then you don't have stuff. You don't see the reflection from the walls or anything else around it.
Yeah, no, it'd be fun to test it on different crops and see how useful it is for detecting issues quickly.
Yeah, on that satellite link, on that that satellite one, they actually have a couple of filters on. I think one of them does a filter that will based on the reflective index, it can tell you what crop's being grown in the field.
Oh, that's nice. Very, very useful.
Because, you know, wheat absorbs things and reflects things different to peas, for example.
And you think they used that to look for wheat before?
No. I don't know, not for looking for wheat, no.
Because I keep hearing that some of the cameras here can like detect the color of the plant.
But what color is a weed plant? It's green. Do I mean?
Yeah, no,
I
but
think
like it separates from the rest when I don't know. If like you say, like you can see what crop it is on the.
yeah, I mean it probably more giveaways the shape of it.
Yeah.
Than maybe the color. But it again, you have to be kind of close to get it down. You know, if you want to get like leaf shape stuff, you've got to get pretty close to what you're looking at. I think more the giveaway would be that that's different compared to everything else around it. Let's go and have a look. You know, especially if you would like
And the
doing it in a
giveaway-
forest, they'd pick it up and go, hang on, there's plants in the middle of that forest that don't look like all the other plants around it.
Yeah. Oh, and if it's obviously been watered and that area has been watered when stuff around it hasn't.
Yeah, all sorts of other clues that indicate you need to go and have a look. I can't tell you what it is, but you may want to go and investigate.
Small local
sure.
oasis has appeared.
Sorry?
A small local oasis has appeared.
Yeah. It's doing remarkably well.
So how fresh were the images? So you could like potentially use this to go crop hunting.
Well, on that satellite, it's every 3 days or so, I think it is, depending on it. There's because between the two satellites, I think they do complete global coverage every 3 days.
And it's many years worth over.
How far back did this go? So the Sentinel satellites go back to 2020. That's when they got launched.
And it's worldwide.
Yep.
You can watch a lot of crops. You can probably see all the cannabis crops come up in Thailand.
It probably could. If you were interested in an area, you could watch it over, you could look at it and then go back to the start and then just click through, click, and watch the images change over time. I was trying to find some good examples of, I wanted to find some areas where they had a drought and then it, you know, it had a good rainfall, and then you can see how it changes. But yeah, you can then just cycle through them. It's updated a lot more frequently than Google Earth is.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I mean, it does suffer from a resolution problem where you can't zoom in quite as close as you can on Google Earth, but you can still get a good idea of what's going on.
Yeah, and I think if you have the location on lock, it's okay.
And that's always going to be the limitation, is the resolution level and how granular you want to get it.
Yeah. Trying to see if there's one that does.
Yeah, maybe, but I think you can pay for a membership, so maybe you get better resolution if you pay.
I don't necessarily know if you get better resolution, to be honest. Yeah, in fact, it's the Sentinel-2 or L1C satellite that has an agriculture band analysis. So it's trying to detect the different types of crops that are being grown. How accurate it is, I'm not entirely sure.
Is it Island? Is it located on Sentinel Island? So they send it out.
I'm not sure why they called it that.
Keeping it safe.
Yep. But I mean,
No intruders.
in one job I was working on, we were using satellites to detect how much buildings had moved by, and you can get down to millimeters of movement in a building using its satellite imagery. That's really kind of freaky. You go like, wow, okay. Because it looks at it from two different angles, and it can then tell how much it's shifted by. And you
I
can
could
get down
see
to
that they were using AI in France to find out where people had built pools.
yeah. I think they did that in Spain as well to tax them accordingly.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice when you get the letter from the construction department or whatever telling you that everything on your property is wrong from some AI bot. Oh,
False positives.
yeah, finally it's here.
Well, I tell you what, that's the show. I think we can call it at that. We've been going for 2 hours. Thank you very much to everybody in chat who's participated.
It's a really good gang in chat.
Yeah. It's good to see everybody. It's nice to see everybody here again. I think we'll try and do these every 2 weeks. I've been chatting with Kino. I think that's kind of what we're going to try and pull together, is so that we just alternate between us. And yeah, I'd like to try and do some more of these where it's on the, what's out there, what can be done, bits and pieces that can help us all understand what we're doing a bit better and growing a bit more, and get more efficient at it. Because it applies to a hell of a lot more than just Canvas.
No, it's really interesting. I think it's strange that it's not more focused on these kind of angles.
Yeah, and the tech's getting cheaper, more affordable, both in terms of the actual cost and in terms of the barrier to entry in the software that you need to do it with. Yeah, it really is these days becoming very much something that everybody can do. A lot of this stuff was very much the reserve of people with deep pockets at one point, but that's not the case anymore. The democratization of access to this type of data is definitely here. It's just I don't think a lot of people are aware of it, and hopefully we can make more people aware of it. So yeah, no, cool. Thanks, guys. I know we do the obligatory. Where can people find you? I mean, you can find me at Operation Grow 2019 on Instagram, and yeah, you can follow us there. If you're watching and you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon, I think is what everybody tends to say. And yeah, we'll try to keep these going. And if there's anything in particular that people would like to cover in future episodes, do let us know. Post something in the comments on a video or something like that, and we'll pick it up and go from there. I think maybe in the next one we can take a look at some AI-driven assistance when it comes to asking questions and getting answers back. Everybody's heard of ChatGPT and the likes. Well, there's quite a bit more that you can do with these large language models. And those can be interestingly beneficial and interesting. Their ability to look at huge amounts of data and summarize and analyze it and then present it back in a really nice digestible format is particularly interesting. So yeah, maybe we'll do that on a future show.
I think Germany and Canada has a company that they're working with together for doing this. I think it's Canomics or something like. No, maybe not. I can find the name for you. But it's a German company.
Because I'll demo on the next show. Is I wrote a few Discord bots that allow you to. One was around horticulture. Another one was around culinary exploits, and one around mycology. And it's actually being fed technical documentation. So it's looking at specific documents to pull the answers from them, and rather than just relying on its general knowledge that it was trained on, you can actually supply it very specific pieces that you wanted to go through to and find the answers in, and that makes it able to answer a lot more questions than it's currently able to do without what they call hallucinating. It actually gives you legit, valid answers. But yeah, on that note, Magma, where can people find you if they would like to look you up?
I can be found on Instagram, I think. Hopefully.
At Magma Seeds, I believe.
Yeah, something like that.
And yourself, GMF?
Honestly, I don't really go on Instagram much anymore. I'm a bit of it when the summer comes around. I have to stay busy, so yeah, and I've been laid up, so yeah, I'm not really anywhere, to be honest.
Just floating around in the ether, as they say.
Yeah, so yeah, about it.
Well, great. Thank you once again, both of you guys, for joining, and also to Raptor, who was on earlier. We'll try to get some more people in. Oh, absolute pleasure. And we shall catch everybody in 2 weeks' time. So on that note,
good to see y'all.
Stay safe, and we'll catch
happy
you
weekend.
later. And you guys.